Okay, so the square root method brings us into the solve by completing the square. And so completing the square, we are actually creating a trinomial that's easy to solve. And we do this by using this little equation right here, b over 2 squared. And this is going to give us a new constant to be added to our existing trinomial. So first, let me show you how to use the b over 2 squared. And it will say, find the value that makes the following binomial a perfect square trinomial. And so this is going to be our c value. So c equals b over 2 squared for complete the square. So in this case, b is a negative 14. So negative 14 over 2 squared. That gives me negative 7 squared, which is 49. So 49, you can tell that's a 49 there, is the value that makes this a perfectly squared trinomial. Okay, let's do it again for number 10, and then we will kind of go through these other steps. So number 10, we're going to find our new c value. C equals b over 2 squared. B in this case is 17 over 2 squared. Now 17 over 2 squared, when you square a fraction, remember you square the top and then square the bottom. So 17 squared is 289 and 2 squared is 4. And we would reduce that if we could. In this case, that's as simple as it's going to go. So 289 over 4 is our new c value. Now in your homework, it's going to say write the trinomial. So we're going to write n squared plus 17n plus 289 over 4. That's our new trinomial. And then it will say factor the result, and that's the next step in complete the square. And when we factor it, now we typically deal with x. In this case, we have an n, but we're always going to have these pieces shown right here. We're always going to have the parentheses. We're always going to have whatever variable we're using. Here we have an n, and then we're going to have a squared, because this is a perfectly squared trinomial. And then what's going to change is the value that we're adding or subtracting to n. Now this value is easy to find. You've already calculated it. It actually comes from right here. Whatever number you squared to get your new c value is what goes here. So now I've factored it. I didn't have to go through the x method or anything like that. You could, and you would see that this these are the factors you would get. But this is the whole reason that we go through to find this new c value, is to make it easy to factor. Okay. So now let's go through this whole process in using complete the square to actually solve. So remember, this is just the factors, but to get solutions, we need to apply that zero product principle. So now let's go through. We're going to do the same thing. So here we've got a trinomial, or we've got a quadratic here. We've got c, our existing c is on the other side of the equation. And when we're doing complete the square, it says must be in general form. And so let me just show you, if I put this in general form, x squared minus 10x minus 2 equals 0. Here's my general form. Now this 2 is not giving me a perfectly square trinomial. And so I'm actually going to move it to the other side. And so really starting off in number 11, I'm kind of in good shape already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add x squared minus 10x. I'm going to add a box here. And this is the same kind of box that you saw from up above on number 9 and number 10, where we were finding that perfect C value. Now, if I add a box on one side, I have to add a box to the other side, because that keeps my equation balanced. So if you're in general form, C has to move to the other side. We're making room for this new C value that we're going to calculate. So inside the box, that's our new C value. And remember, this equals B over 2 squared. So in this case, B is negative 10. So negative 10 divided by 2 squared, that's negative 5 squared, which is 25. So inside my box, I put a 25. Both of my boxes are always going to have the same number. Okay? So I moved C, I put a box in, I calculated what goes in the box. The next step is to factor. So just like right here when I factored, now I'm going to factor this side. So I've got my parentheses, got my squared, and my variable. Now remember, the value that goes here is the value that I squared right there. So in this case, it's a negative 5. So x minus 5 squared, those are the factors. So I'm going to write factor so that you remember later that that's the step that we took there. Equals 27. 2 plus 25 is 27. So now what I've got is something that I can solve using the square root method. And so I'm going to put, for this next step, actually let's do the square root method. Square root method. So now I'm going to take the square root of both sides, because I've got something squared equals a number. So this becomes x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 27. Now I can't reduce, let's see, can I reduce the square root of 27? Yes, I can. So I'm going to come up here. X minus 5 equals plus or minus, this is 3 radical 3. Now you have the option here. You can split it apart into 2 different scenarios, or you can just add the 5 here. X equals plus or minus 3 radical 3 plus 5. And those are my solutions. So this, when I started, this was a quadratic that I would not have been able to factor, and it was not in a form that I could solve using the square root method. And so we use complete the square. It's a method you can use for any quadratic to get solutions. All right, number 12. So one thing you always want to check with your quadratics when you're doing the square root method is, do I have a common factor in all of my coefficients and my constant here? And right here, everything is divisible by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take out that 2. I'm going to end up with x squared equals 2x plus 8. It's going to simplify everything for us here. Now we're using the complete the square method. So I only need C to be on this side. So I'm going to subtract 2x so that I can get it over here on the left. So x squared minus 2x equals 8. Now I need to put in my box. I'm trying to write out every single step here. Because remember, in the box is where I put my perfect C to give me a perfectly squared trinomial so that it's easy to factor. So now, move over just a little. Let's calculate what goes in the box. So in the box, this is my new C value. This is B over 2 squared. B in this case is a -2. So -2 divided by 2 squared. That's a -1 squared, which is +1. So inside the box, I'm putting a +1. Once you fill in the box, the next step is to factor. So remember, I always have these parts. I always have the parentheses, I always have the exponent of 2 and my variable. So what goes here, remember, I get from right here. In this case, a -1. So x minus 1 squared equals 9. And then I'm going to do the square root method. Because I've got something squared isolated on one side. So let's take the square root of both sides. This becomes x minus 1 equals plus or minus 3. And this time I am going to split it into two different scenarios. X minus 1 is 3, just because it's not a radical. I know I'm going to be able to simplify it a little bit more. So x minus 1 can be 3, or x minus 1 can be -3. So let's add 1. We get x equals 4. Add 1 here. X equals -2. So here's my two solutions. So completing the square, you can use this method for any quadratic. You can use it to solve any quadratic, even the ones that you can't factor. You can also use the quadratic formula, which is what we're going to talk about next.